All right, hey there. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bloomerang TV. I'm Steven Shattuck. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang. And today, my guest, I'm really excited to have him, Derrick Duplessy. He is the Executive Director over at the Duplessy Foundation, which is in Boston, Massachusetts. Hey there, Derrick. How's it going?
I'm doing well, Stephen. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for being here. So, for people who don't know about your foundation, what does your foundation do? Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version.
All right.
So I basically grew up in the inner city here in Boston, and somebody really invested a lot of time with me in high school. A lot of folks actually, and I got that bug, the helping people bug, and I worked with students at the Upward Bound program. And what happened then was, I was like, wow, this does not pay very much. So I got into executive recruiting. But I would still see some of my students downtown, and some of them would say, hey, Derrick, and they would cover their face. And I'm like, hey, what's going on with you? And they told me that they dropped out of school. And that was because they were doing something entrepreneurial or they're doing something artistic, and they didn't feel like a desk job, sort of a 9 to 5, was going to work for them.
Yeah.
So I started informally mentoring those guys, just helping them get to the next step, whether that's an apprenticeship or some type of like formal training. And I sort of got addicted to that, fell in love with that. And now we formally have a program where we work with 18 to 24-year-olds who are from Boston's inner city, who are creative, artistic entrepreneurs, and we help them basically build a brand and a business.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a great organization, and I really like talking to young EDs like you because you do really neat modern things. And one of the things that you do that I wanted to talk about today is you have a podcast, which is not the most popular sort of content outlet, I feel like, among nonprofits. But you guys have one, and it's really awesome. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're doing there on the podcast front.
Sure. It's funny. I absolutely love our organization and our mission, but I know that nobody really cares. In the larger scheme of things, there might be thousands of people that love what we do, but there's billions of people on this earth. And I'm greedy. I still want people to connect to our mission in a way that makes sense for them and applies to them. And essentially, our tagline and what we do is we help people pursue your purpose, right? So even if you can't connect or understand an artist's story and help them build a brand, you can understand that I am not doing something where my skills and what I really care about are aligned. And I hopefully want to be that person where what I'm doing and its impact aligns very well with my skills. So we interview people every single day of the weekday, and they tell their career stories. And I think people really dig it and enjoy it. They're like, wow, I can really connect to this. And of course, I sneak in, hey, we're doing this for inner city folks,
right?
Who happen to be artists, and it's going really well. And right now, as we speak, the #1 referral source of traffic to the Duplessy Foundation site is the podcast site.
I believe it. So this is a really sort of ingenious strategy. This is something that a lot of for-profit marketers do because they understand what you just said. You can't just make a bunch of content about yourself, right? Because there's not going to be that many people interested in it. But what you do is you interview a lot of people, and it's really entertaining, and it's educational, and it's engaging. So can you talk a little bit about kind of the strategy that went into that? How did you actually conceptualize this podcast?
Yeah, it was real interesting. I was listening to a lot of podcasts just for inspiration, just to help myself in terms of having mobile education. I think the first podcast I would listen to was Manager Tools, right? Great podcast. And I was like, why isn't there a podcast that really fits me, sort of the cause space or the social space where I can learn and be inspired by that space? There's a lot of how-tos. You guys do donor management and stuff like that, which is awesome. But I also want to get that inspiration, get people's story, really identify with people and feel encouraged. And it just didn't exist. And I knew that if I wasn't the only person with this problem. You're in nonprofit, you love it, but
Yep.
you just want that daily encouragement. So that was the genesis of the podcast itself. And I knew that if we're able to get people to this one channel, then we'll be able to funnel them to our other channel, which would be our website.
That makes sense. I think every nonprofit should do this, honestly. I'm giving a presentation on content marketing in a couple of days to some
Mm.
nonprofits. I'm definitely going to talk about this because I think what you're doing is really awesome. So you know it's driving traffic, so you know it's
Yeah.
successful. So do you know kind of what happens once they get there? Have you been able to kind of measure the success of it once they hit your website? You know, what's the actual ROI of that traffic?
Wow, that's a good question. Right. So basically, the podcast started in February,
Hmm.
and it was an experiment, and I wanted to see what would happen if we just started the podcast and created a website for the podcast that is really focused on the individuals coming to the page, not us, you know.
Yep.
And so what has happened is that we get 2,000 visitors per month, a little bit
Wow.
over that
Okay.
for the podcast page. And our Duplessy Foundation site regularly gets 500, 600 visitors per month, and it's sort of like a standard nonprofit site. It's
Yeah.
like a brochure. You go in there, you learn a little bit, and you never come back.
Right.
Right? But what I've found is the time on site is a little bit higher on a podcast site,
Great.
and the podcast site has really served as a guinea pig for how we want Duplessy Foundation site to be. So we're actually in the process of doing over the Duplessy Foundation site, having it be a place that you want to come to each and every day. And so what we want to do, just like the podcast page, is make it a place not just for us to tell our story, but to use our story to help other people. So, for example, you're an artist out there, you don't know how to create a content calendar, you don't know how to sort of break down your brand. I'm going to use the story of a photographer that we're mentoring and say, here's the things that you can do to help yourself out.
Yep.
Because I think ultimately that's the play that is going to really make social as big as the for-profit space.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when a nonprofit makes their website an actual resource rather than a brochure, to use your words, that's when
Hmm.
magic really starts happening. So I think what you're doing is right on. Okay, so a nonprofit who wants to get into this, maybe they want to start their own podcast. What tips, what advice would you have for them? You know, from topics, concepts to even equipment. What should people do who want to get into this?
Well, it's pretty simple. So you don't have to have super duper fancy equipment.
Hmm.
Right now, I have a Logitech HD camera that I got for I think it's $40. So it might be even $30 from a local electronics shop. And hopefully, this is getting the job done. You can see me very clearly and you can hear
Yeah.
me. The camera has an onboard mic, which I'm using. I actually have a podcast mic, which is not working right now, and that's what I'm using. Just $30 in your computer, and you're ready to go. In terms of content, every organization has an unfair advantage. So my good friends over here in Boston, who I'm encouraging to do this, Zoomix, they're sort of organization that basically is a place for folks 7 to 19 to do music and
Hmm.
learn music and just hang out. Um, they can teach people about the basics and fundamentals of music, and they can sort of go they can go piano, they can go guitar. There's all kinds of places that they can go, and they're still pushing their mission forward by helping all these people, getting a lot of people to notice what they're doing. I interviewed for the podcast uh, Top Cow Productions CEO. His name is Matt Hawkins. And I asked him what's the biggest challenge for him. And he said the biggest challenge is getting noticed in a noisy world. And I think if you're a nonprofit, the way you can get noticed is by figuring out how can we use what we know to help other people? What's
Yep.
our unfair advantage?
You do have an unfair advantage. I mean, every nonprofit. should have no shortage of things to talk about. Anything relating to their mission, their cause, what they're doing, no problem. Well, cool, man. This is great, Derek. You talk about inspiring people. I think you're hopefully going to inspire people watching this to get into this. I think you really get content marketing, and nonprofits should really start doing this kind of thing. So, give you the last word before we go. Where can people find out about you? Where can they listen to the podcast?
purposerockstar.com. We have some awesome interviews, folks from every walk of life, everyone from people in video games to people in comics to writers to everything you can imagine. And it's a great place to get inspired and just listen to other people's stories.
All right, we're going to link to it. Derek, thanks for hanging out with us, man. This is really awesome.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, and looking forward to more and new awesome episodes from Bloomerang.
All right, we will do it. And thanks to everyone for watching. We will catch you next week, so we'll see you then. Bye now.